watching the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm, endorsed by the Hello Deli.
Yeah.
La, la, la.
Welcome once again to the Letterman podcast. As always, my name is Mike Chisholm. I am very excited to talk to folks about Letterman and Company and all of the little rabbit trails that have happened as a result of that. Again, we call this show it's the greatest broadcasting work in history. Unabashedly, that's how I feel. That's how this show feels. That's the mission statement of this show is to talk about the stories and preserve some of the knowledge of that have come out of the greatest body of broadcasting work in history. Today's guest is phenomenal in so many respects. I use the word phenomenal too much, people say sometimes, but it absolutely is apt. Alex Bennett's coming on the show here. Now, Alex Bennett, to me, a pioneer in broadcasting in so many ways. He is, has gone across the country, old school, the way that old school radio guys would go across the country, starting in San Francisco, some middle America stuff, and then ending up, of course, in New York and having legendary runs at multiple stations in New York, going back to San Francisco, having a legendary run at Live 105 to do with stand-up and comedy, and then moving back to New York and finishing up his career at Sirius. And since he finished up his career, he still goes on and on and on, because you can't scratch the itch when you're a broadcaster like that. I feel that a little bit with me in this show. I don't really have an outcome for this show. Obviously, I've got aspirations, but the joy, I think, is going to be the same, even if and when, something might happen beyond what we're doing here right now. I don't know that the joy is going to increase because the joy is so high right now. And Alex Bennett is a guy who gets a lot of joy out of broadcasting. I panel with him on his show every week. So you can go to gabnet.net, look at the information towards that if ever you want to be a part. If you like, he brings people on, and if you're nice and just enjoy being on panel with this legendary broadcaster, you can do that. The reason that I got hooked up with him is because of Rick Scheckman, and we've been tributing Rick obviously since he passed, and we're going to continue to do that because he's my friend and he's a huge part of who I am when it comes to this show, when it comes to being involved with those in the Letterman community. Rick Scheckman is kind of my guy. And he introduced me to Alex, and for a few years, every Monday I would go on and panel with these guys, and then, Rick and I would talk from time to time in between the shows and things, and that's where our friendship grew. Alex has been Rick's best friend, or one of Rick's very best friends, for 45 years, and he's a legendary broadcaster. So of course we're going to have him on here, and he's going to tell all sorts of stories about his friendship with Rick, about his life in broadcasting, and it gives me goosebumps that I get to kind of mesh those things together and maybe bring that to a new audience that may not have known him as much or as well, and also to talk about Rick at the same time, because I wouldn't know Alex if it wasn't for Rick, and I just appreciate the fact that we get to have this show. So without further ado, the Letterman podcast would like to present, brought to you by, of course, the Hello Deli. We'll talk about them a little bit in the outro as news of the sale of the Hello Deli is starting to get out there as well. But the Letterman podcast, brought to you by the Hello Deli, is proud to present my conversation with broadcast legend Alex Bennett. Alex Bennett, broadcast legend. I am so excited to be able to talk to you here.
Don't say legend. Legends are dead. Okay.
I don't know, man. I think this is one of those things where it's surreal talking to you here, because the reason I got to know you was because of Rick. I wouldn't know you if it wasn't for Rick. As his and my friendship was kind of blossoming a little bit, I think he was trying to vet me to make sure I wasn't, I don't know, I wasn't one of the crazies that are out there.
You weren't a loony.
Yeah. I think so. And one of the things he did was he said, okay, well, you should start coming on this show that I do with radio legend Alex Bennett. And
here we go again with that radio legend crap.
I know that's what, hey, his words, man. I went through it. I went through it. Our correspondence over the last week. I've been going through all of our correspondence over the years, and I wouldn't have ever met you if it wasn't for him, and I'm so grateful for that. I really appreciate you taking time to do this here, and talk a little bit about your
I'm a
connection.
little bit busy, and I've got to get going here. So
you've got that huge schedule.
I've got so much to do with my pathetic life. I never.
Oh man, you know what? Here's the thing I love about you. A huge personality in broadcasting on both coasts. And after your final run with Sirius ended, it's like, okay, well, the career part, moving into the retirement time, that might be there from on a chronological standpoint on the clock, but you've still got the itch, and you've been broadcasting ever since you left Sirius. Basically, Gabinet's been going for a long time now, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has been. Yeah.
You can't turn it off, can you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's the one thing keeps me living. I think that I almost feel that if I don't do it, I will die.
Yeah.
Okay. That it gives me some reason for existence.
I feel you. Yeah. I'm grateful that you do, because, and it's very neat in the different incarnations of what you are doing right now, how people who followed you over the years now have this kind of almost unbridled access to you. It's really fun seeing some of these people who listened to you, whether you were in New York or back in San Francisco. And now they're able to, they talk about these memories of your show from all these years. Does that feel good? Or are you one of those guys that doesn't really care about the past so much, you just keep steamrolling forward?
I mean, it always is a nice feeling. I mean, I'm not going to say that it doesn't make me feel good that I had some kind of impact on somebody's life.
Yeah.
And that that I had an impact on their life. And so they go, oh, I remember I used to listen to you when I was a kid, and I go, yeah, I could like slough them off and just say, go away.
Right.
Or I can say to myself, actually I had an impact on their life in some way. And that's what I did radio for, was to have some kind of an impact, no matter what it was. I mean, years ago when I first, when I was younger and in just getting out of high school, I got my girlfriend pregnant, and she went ahead and had the kid.
Mm-hmm.
And the first night that I found that she wasn't going to have it with me, and we weren't going to get together and get married, which is what you did in those days.
Yep.
And raise the kid, and the kid was going to be put up for adoption. I got very depressed. I mean, I was almost, I don't know that I've ever been suicidal, because I'm too cowardly to commit suicide. I mean, I really wish I had the ability to commit suicide, because I wouldn't be here talking to you right now.
I get that a lot, buddy.
And if I was going to end it, it would have been at that point in my life. And I was driving around Marin County, just depressed, because it was finally determined that I couldn't see her. She was still pregnant, but I couldn't see her, and the parents didn't want me to see her. And I was just really depressed, and I was at my wit's end. And I passed by, I was driving around Marin County, because, when you live in California, you drive, you don't walk.
Yep.
And I'm driving around Marin County, and I'm in Sausalito, and there's a theater. And I used to get the movie wrong, but I think the movie was the movie on the marquee at the theater. It was the Tiburon. No, it wasn't was it Tiburon Theater? No, what was the name? Oh, it was the Marin Theater, it was called. Yeah, I think that was the name of the theater. And there was they were playing Cinderfella.
Oh, yeah.
With Jerry Lewis.
Yeah.
So I just figured, I got nothing else to do. Let me just go inside. Maybe it'll take my mind off of it or whatever. And I went in and I started watching this thing.
Yeah.
And about halfway through the film, I found I was really laughing at it. And when it was over with, I felt a lot better. Now, I hate to think that I felt a lot better watching a Jerry Lewis film, but in those days, he was the best thing there was out there.
Oh,
Okay?
absolutely.
You know,
Without a doubt.
for making people laugh. And he made me laugh when otherwise I would have blown my brains out. Okay.
Yep.
At that point, I said, I suddenly get what I want to do, which is broadcasting, why it's so valuable. Because if there's somebody else out there and I'm doing a radio show and they feel terrible and they want to commit, they want to end it all, or, you know, whatever the circumstances are. And somehow for a brief moment, I take them away from that. I've done my job. If I do it just once in my lifetime, I will have done my job. So that has always been my stated mission, that my job is to make people feel happy. You know,
I appreciate what you're saying and how you just said it. You said it like it is a mission statement or a stated mission. I love how you put that, because when you look at the different incarnations of your personality over the years, the superseding statement is that you want to make people feel better. Now, the way that you did that through some of the different incarnations of your career had a roundabout way of getting there, because you were in many ways, I don't want to use the word provocateur. I just can't think of a better word at this point here. You love to kind of get into it with people at a time when that was rarer for broadcasters. Is that a fair statement?
I don't know if it was rare. I'm trying to think. I'll tell you what happened. A lot of people like to think that Limbaugh invented the medium of nasty ass radio.
Yes.
And he didn't really. It was a guy out in California by the name of Joe Pine. And Joe Pine was, again, a talk show host. And he was, you know, get off the phone, leave me alone. I don't want to, you know, that kind of thing. Hangs up on people and so on. And I briefly got to know Joe Pine through my ex-wife, my first ex-wife, whose name I can't even remember. And Joe Pine, I was walking down the street with him, and this guy comes up to him and says, you know, he's a mendicant. He says, "Do you have it? Can you spare $1?" You know. And Job threw $5 in his hand, and then he looked at me and he said, "Don't ever tell anybody I did."
Yes.
Okay. So, you know, that to me was what radio was all about. The character that you play on the air is not necessarily the character you are in real life.
Yes.
And so consequently, that has always been my position. And I don't care. For instance, when I was growing up as a kid, my favorite radio show, because yes, folks, they used to have radio with actual programs that entertained and played music, and people sang, and some of them even danced. You could hear them tapping, you know. But the thing is, when I was growing up listening to radio, my favorite was Jack Benny.
Yes.
And the thing that I never really was able to understand what it was about Benny that made him different and why I loved him so. But as the years went on, it started becoming kind of apparent.
Yeah.
And that was that the Benny character, and people like to think Benny was a comedian. Benny wasn't a comedian. Benny was a clown. And the difference between a comedian and a clown is a comedian pulls jokes on people. A clown has jokes pulled on him.
Okay.
And everything that was funny about the Jack Benny show was at Benny's expense. He was cheap, you know, he was this, he was that, you know. Anybody who got a real laugh on that show, Benny didn't get the laughs.
Right.
People who were putting him down got the laughs.
Right.
You know, it was a beautiful trick of the hat. And I never realized how deeply, I mean, I was really influenced by Benny.
Yes.
Okay, in radio.
Yeah.
Probably my major influence. I had two major influences, Benny and a guy who was a disc jockey in San Francisco named Don Sherwood, but more on that later.
Sure.
But it was just that, you know, Jack Benny had something going for him that I really resonated with me. Yeah. So really, as a broadcaster, most of the time the jokes are pulled on me.
Right.
They're not. I don't pull it on them. although I do sometimes now. I mean, I do more than Benny ever did.
Sure.
But you know, people always make jokes about me, and you know, I'm a hypochondriac, and I'm this, and I'm that, and you know, Benny had all these faults that were very funny faults. You know, I mean, who could possibly think the most beloved comedian in America, a clown, as I said, in America, was a guy who was known for being cheap?
Right.
You know. So.
Well, okay. So as you say that, it gets me going onto the, you know, kind of the Letterman of it all, which is where I go much of the time, you know, hence the show. You know, Carson loved Jack Benny. And I think about Carson.
Carson, you don't know this about Carson. Benny would take the summers off, and then he would have a substitute host who would host the show. And Carson was the host at one point.
There you go. Yes, absolutely.
And all his timing and all his takes and so on were pure Benny. Yeah.
Well, and here's where I'm going to go with this, because you've got Benny. You know, if we want to go back into scripture presentation, Benny begat Carson, Carson begat Letterman, and when you think about, you know, Carson, some of his favorite moments that I remember growing up, my dad loved Johnny Carson. And he loved Johnny Carson kind of the way, in many ways, in the same respect that I revere Dave. I remember Carson, like I just remember moments where, you know, him and Julio Iglesias coming out, and then you see Carson for the very first time revealing himself as Willie Nelson, and they're singing To All the Girls I Loved Before. And the joke was how much Willie Nelson and Johnny Carson kind of resembled each other at that point, and how Carson could do the spot on impression. But the laughs were coming, again, that self-deprecation. You could see that going down. And then Letterman made an art form out of it, where self-deprecation was kind of his calling card. And isn't that interesting how these people who influenced each other and that clown aspect that you're talking about resonated in and influenced entire generations of broadcasters or performers?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, when you look at Carson, I mean, one night I was out of work in San Francisco. It was one of the times that I
not for the first time either, probably.
Not for the first time. Although people overplay how you know, how many times I got fired. It wasn't that often, you know. But when
and you got rehired instantly, like you were cachet in the radio business, in many respects. And we'll get to that.
I don't think as much as I should have been considered. Yeah. But anyway,
I'm glad you know that, because there's a lot of people who feel that way about you, Alex. I'm glad you at least feel that way too, because many times guys like you, including Letterman, downplay themselves and whatnot. I'm glad.
Well,
I'm glad you know that.
Look. What influence have I had in this business? Probably very little, unless you want to start saying there probably wouldn't have been a Howard Stern if there hadn't been an Alex Bennett.
I say it all the time. Howard Stern drove on the highway that Alex Bennett paved. I say that all the time.
And he also drove on the highways listening to Alex Bennett when he was growing up. You know.
There we go. And I'm very glad you said that. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to hear you say that on camera. I'm glad that you said that. That's awesome.
Well, I say it, and I do in a way resent it. But that's another story down the line too, about my relationship with Howard.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought this wasn't going to be about me. This was going to be about our dear.
It is, but we're setting the table. And I love this, because we're going to get to, I want to go back to, you know, your time at, you know, with WMCA in New York. And then that led to, you know, you leaving the East, going back West. And when you went back West to live and your live show, back in San Francisco was all about comics. There's lots of stand-ups that would be on there. And I want to, I know we've talked about it ad nauseum on your show, but a lot of our audience don't necessarily know, for example, the Bill Hicks story. Well, Shecky, of course, you and Shecky's relationship, really some very cool behind the scenes with Hicks on that. I want to get to that. But before we do, I want to start, I want to get to the place where you and Shecky connected to each other. God, I miss him. I miss him so much. And I, you know, I released an episode.
When I miss him, it's only been a week, you know.
I know.
More than a week. What I miss him is, like, I was watching Superman and Lois this week, and they changed one of the sons on the show. And I wanted to call Shecky and ask
First
him.
thing you want to do. Yep.
And I went, Shecky's not there. I mean, it happened one other time this week too, where there was just something that I saw that I you know, that had to do actually with another DC show or something. Yeah, Gotham Knights.
Yeah.
Which is a very good show, by the way. And I want to just ask him what he thought of it. You know, that's what we would do on Saturdays, because for about maybe 30 years,
Yeah.
maybe longer than that, we talk to each other every Saturday or Sunday, usually Saturday. And when I was out in California, it was always Saturday at 1 o'clock California time.
Yeah.
And I would call him, and then we would talk for like an hour. And then next week we talk for another hour.
So, and here's the other part I want to let the viewers and the listeners know. You also an enthusiast of David Letterman. You love that. And many of those talks, of course, you know, as you're talking, he sums up the week that happened at Late Night or Late Show, you know, and I mean, the stories that Rick had.
Yeah, but we
didn't
talk much about the show.
No?
No. There was no need to. That was his job.
Yeah.
When I'm calling him, it's in non-job time.
Right.
You know, and occasionally I would ask him a question about Dave or something like that. You know.
Sure.
But
you know, and the Hicks part is the one where I want to. We're definitely going to go with that.
You got to realize my relationship with Rick started before Letterman.
Okay, so this is where I want to go, because I know that you were an enthusiast of the show, but at the end of the day, before the show happened, you started creating ties to the show without even knowing it, like years beforehand. Like the legend has it that Robert Morton, that Morty, sold you a cable package, and when he did, he was a gigantic fan of yours. At the time, this is when you were in New York. This is after the John Lennon, Abby Hoffman years, kind of a thing. You hadn't moved back out yet.
He was going door to door selling cable.
Robert Morton shows up at your door to sell you cable. Did he know that you were the person behind the door?
You know something? It's strange. No, and I don't think when I bought it from him, he knew it. Or I may have already bought it. I may have already had cable. I don't know. And he was there with, I'm trying to remember the other guy's name. He became the head of programming, comedy programming at Showtime. And they were pals, and they would go door to door selling cable.
Yeah.
And the reason I found out that he had sold me cable is I met up with Morty once, Shecky went to work there and so on.
Yeah.
And he said, we've met before. And I said, when? And he said, I sold you cable. And he told me, he said, I really want to thank you because you were running a show called Midnight Blue, which was kind of the adult fare on cable.
Yep.
We were running Midnight Blue, and you made us more money than any other single factor, except for Chinese broadcasting.
The sheer numbers. I mean, how do you compete?
We go into Chinatown, and everybody would buy Chinese programs.
Yeah, exactly.
But he said, we sold more cable boxes because of you than anybody else. And he said, you kept me alive he said, I made good money too. He said, you kept me alive,
And then went on from there. I love that connection. I loved hearing that because I've heard it from both ends. I've heard it from your end and from Morty's end before. And I love that. Did
Morty tell you about this?
Yes, absolutely. So the way that happened was, he and I were going back and forth. I feel like he's kind of playing with me like a cat with a mouse a little bit. That's what's happening. And I mentioned something about Alex Bennett. He goes, oh yeah, did you know I sold him cable once? And I did, because you and Shecky and I had talked about it on the show once or something. And he was surprised by that. Every once in a while I kind of surprised. So yes, he does absolutely. I wouldn't want to put words in his mouth, but he certainly was proud to talk about that because he was a fan of yours.
Yeah, and Morty was a good guy. I liked Morty.
Yeah.
Everybody loved Morty.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know why he left the show, or why the show left him actually. But I can't imagine it was because they didn't like him.
No,
no,
absolutely not. And we'll explore that another time when we go here. But do you remember the first time you met Rick?
Okay, I was his birthday present.
Here we go.
Yeah. I had a friend, Steve Weiner, who
Yep,
you
my friend too.
interviewed
Love
on
Steve.
this program.
Yep.
And he eventually wound up, he and his partner, comedy writing partner,
Carl.
wound
Yeah.
up, Carl Tiedemann,
Yep.
wound up being the first set of writers on the late night version of the Letterman show.
The pencil gag, the smashing of the glass. That's Steve Weiner's gag.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then of course Calvert DeForest, introducing Calvert DeForest.
Calvert DeForest, what happened? Well, we're all over the place with this, and we
no, that's okay. Steve was responsible for those.
Take it in a linear fashion.
That's okay. Yeah.
But the thing with Weiner and Tiedemann is they made a student film at NYU called King of the Z's.
Yep.
Which was a documentary about the lowest poverty row movie studio called what was it called?
Is it Gaspari?
Gaspari. What was it?
Is it Gaspari? Is that what it is? I forget the name of it off the top of my head. We're going to be releasing King of the Z's actually on this channel here coming up. Steve's given us a pristine copy of it that we're going to be putting out. So
it's a very funny.
Or Verducci? Verducci, is that what it was?
Verducci.
I think it was Verducci. Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, and Calvert was in that.
Yes.
So when they hired Weiner, and Tiedemann, they hired them based on the film, and then they said, "Who's that guy in the film?" And they said, "Oh, that's Calvert DeForest." And they said, "You got his number?" And that's how,
the first film for the first frame of Late Night was Calvert coming out there saying, "Here's what we're gonna like." It's the first thing we ever saw on Late Night was Calvert. Yeah.
Well, in the movie King of the Z's, he comes out at the beginning of the film with the horrible logo of Vespucci Films. That was it. Vespucci Films, and he says, "This is a Vespucci film," and so I think that's where they got the idea to do the same thing on the Letterman show.
Yep.
But all these things, all these things fall into each other. But anyway, you asked how I met Shecky.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was Shecky's birthday, so I was invited to come visit, meet them at a restaurant, and for this guy's birthday party, because Weiner, who said to me he loves your show, he loves your radio show. It would just be fun to have you walk in and join us, right? And so I did that, and I walked in, and I was introduced, and that was Shecky, and I was Shecky's birthday present, and from then on, I can't remember a time that we didn't know each other. With friendships. I have some guy I talked to the other day. I haven't talked to in 25 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That happens. People disappear from
definitely.
Then they reappear, and then maybe they become very good friends.
Yep.
I mean, one of my best friends, Bruce David, who was the editor of Hustler magazine at one time, he and I had a falling out, but we couldn't ever figure out what for. We didn't talk to each other for 20 years, but once we started talking to each other again, we were fast and furious with each other as friends. So that happens. But with Rick, there has never been a cessation in the time that I have known Rick or talked with Rick or had a contact with Rick. Yeah.
I'll tell you this. I've been thinking about him a lot, and random thoughts coming to my head, and things that I want to say about him and whatnot. And the thing about your two friendship that I love that you two, as best friends, found each other kind of in midlife, and it's fascinating to me. You talk about this on the phone every week for 25 years, without or seeing each other or whatever, taking trips together. I love this aspect, but for 25 years, but you guys didn't meet each other. This isn't a childhood friend thing that goes into adulthood. We met each other as adults, having gone through some of the scars of life, the lessons of life, successes and failures, and you figure out who you are, and you start kind of doing life's work. And then you find each other with this amazing complementary compatibility.
What it is that the only time that I have realized what Shecky was in my life, I mean, how consistently he was a part of my life, is when he died. And I started saying, gee, I remember when, and I remember this, and I remember that. For instance, I'll give you a good example. I mean, I think you've heard me talk about this. Marjorie, my wife, and I, we weren't married at the time, went out to California because Shecky and I had agreed to go out to California to see the showing of Napoleon with a full symphony orchestra run by Carl Davis, who writes beautiful scores to silent film.
And your dad was, that was what he did as a career musician that was in this sort of realm of things, right? So this is a huge influence to you.
He didn't do movies. No.
No. But I'm saying symphonies and the musical scores and things like that. Like this is something that appealed to you.
The thing that bound us together was this 5.5-hour film. Imagine sitting there watching a 5.5-hour silent film. And so at the last minute, Marjorie said, I'll go with you. So I bought another ticket for the movie and another ticket on the plane.
Yep.
And we were going to meet Shecky out there because he had something he had to do. And we decided to go out early because I'm from San Francisco. I want to go see friends and I want to, enjoy myself. And so we went out ahead of him. And I said to Marjorie, I said, let's go up to Lake Tahoe. Because I used to, when I was a kid, I used to do these little late night runs up to Lake Tahoe.
Yep.
And then gamble for a couple hours and then drive back. I mean, it's a 3.5-hour drive each way, but it was something you did, in the middle of the night. So I said, why don't we go up to Lake Tahoe and we can, and then I said, as long as we're going to Lake Tahoe, why don't we just get a marriage license and get married? So
might go down in the annuals of the most romantic proposal of all time. Well done, sir.
Well, no, actually, she proposed to me on leap year.
Even better.
On leap year. So anyway, so I said, okay, so let's do it now. We can get married now. So she found this woman up there who marries people and so on. And we went up there and we got married. Well, we now come back. We got to meet Shecky. He's just got in from the plane. And we met him at the Walt Disney Museum in the Presidio. And we walk up to him and we go, guess what? And he said, you got married. He said, I figured you would. He says, too close to Lake Tahoe. It's too close to Nevada,
He had that mind too. He had a very perceptive, very kind of sharp, logical mind that would do that.
The first person that I told, there was a person, my business manager knew we were going up there to get married. But outside of that, the first person that I told that we were married after we got married was Rick.
Yeah.
And
this is in 2012.
And by the way, I always for the most part, called him Rick. And he called me Ben because when I knew him, there was no Shecky when I knew him. He got that.
Steve Weiner's is the same thing. Yeah.
He got that from Dave.
That's right.
And when I talk publicly about him, I always refer to him as Shecky because it's a known fact that in comedy, you have to have at least one friend named Shecky.
Everybody knew Shecky Green for a long time, but having another one. I love that about, and he called, coincidentally, Alex Bennett, wonderful radio name and whatnot. And there's a history as to how Alex Bennett showed up, but he called you Bennett. That's how he referred to me. Ben. He was to me always as Bennett.
No, Ben.
As Ben, yeah.
Yeah, he used to refer to me as Ben when we're talking together.
Yeah.
In fact, when he was in the hospital, comatose, out, in order to try and maybe wake him up or whatever, I said, Rick, it's Ben, because that way I thought maybe it would resound with him or something. But apparently I meant nothing to him. He wouldn't wake up out of a coma. Geez almighty, Rick. God, one last slam at me. Crying out.
Well, actually, I had one in there too. All of us, and I mean, this is a little bit of, I think this is inside baseball. We can talk about, we don't want to get too personal about the details of things, but one of the things that happened was a bunch of people who love Rick put a bunch of messages together and in the form of emails and whatnot. They were put into a book, and I know they were being read to him and whatnot. And in mine, I did a PS at the end of mine.
I couldn't put anything in that book.
Yeah, well, you were in there. You were in the room. I think this was more for people who couldn't get in the room and things like that. And
the reason I couldn't is there's part of me, I didn't want him to die.
Absolutely.
Okay, I didn't want him to die. And I felt that by putting a book together with pictures and stuff like that was a little premature, because that's what you do after people die.
So it was in your mind, that was a resignation, and
Well,
we don't want to have that.
It was a resignation, and it was kind of like there's a thing in the Jews called Kanahura, that you say something and it might come true, And,
I feel you. Well,
yeah.
It's funny. Mine was a get well message. And at the end of mine, I even put, listen, you got to pull out of this soon, because I can go on the show every Monday and hold Bennett at bay for a little while, but I'm only going to last a week or two. So we need you back on the show. That was my little shot at you for him.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I was going through a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah.
And now I'm willing to probably put some pictures into something or whatever, because he's gone, and it'll be a testament to him.
Yes.
But I just felt it was, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. That was too much resignation. I'll tell you what I did do, what I was doing, my own way of dealing with it, was I started writing emails to him every day during the process, and just saying what was going on while he was out, hoping that once he came around, I would just mail these things to his email, and the first emails he would get when he woke up would be these emails, but I never got to send them.
You're giving me goosebumps. It's beautiful that you did that.
But I still have them here. I still have a file.
That's beautiful. Here, so you say that a lot of these things impacted you after he died, and you started thinking about these things. But I'm going to just throw out there, I'm a different point of view to this, because I only came into Rick's life in 2020. And as he invited me to be on the show with you guys every week, which again, I'm just blown away by, and I love it. I treasure. I try whatever I'm doing at 1 o'clock Pacific time on Mondays. I try and take anything that's going on in my life and just go, nope, this is Mike time, because I get to go on with you guys. And I love that. But as that was happening, he said, hey, look, Alex has he didn't write a book. Alex Bennett didn't write a book because he's a broadcaster. And so he put out his life in a series called Life in the Passing Lane. And it's available on podcast platforms, it's on Gabnet and all these places. And so I grabbed it and I started listening to it. And it was, I would recommend this to anybody who, it's an entertaining life that you've had. It's fantastic. Anybody who likes autobiographies, but particularly who likes broadcasting and the stories of broadcasting, Life in the Passing Lane, I cannot endorse it or recommend it enough. And you talk about your life early on.
Well, I'll tell you where Rick comes into that, is occasionally I'd have to call up Rick and say, what year did this happen? There are two people I would call. One was Rick, and I'll say, when did this happen? Because, when you start going back, you go, hey, did that happen in 73 or that happened in 75? And
Rick had that mind. He had that encyclopedia mind.
But another guy who has that same encyclopedic mind of knowing everything I did when I did it was my friend, the comedian Larry Bubbles Brown, who has this weird memory. And he could tell me the day. And sometimes the time of day that the event took place. Yeah.
That's like the gal on Taxi. There's a condition that you have where,
Well, he claims she's the king of the.
But it's like that.
Yeah. But so I would call up Bubbles and say, hey, Bubbles, when did we do this? When was this? Because I forgot, and quite frankly, I don't know if I could do Life in the Passing Lane today, because my memory is starting to falter.
Sure.
And I wanted to get that thing done before I couldn't do it. And so if people want it, it's over at gabnet.net, and it's 70 half-hour episodes. So if you want to waste 35 hours of your life, go ahead and listen to my history.
I did it. I wouldn't call it a waste. I would call it an investment in edutainment. It's educational and entertaining at the same time. So, but about halfway through, that's when your relationship with Rick started. And I mean, you, in my mind, talk about him with all of the sentimentality that you are talking about him now.
Do I mention him in there?
many times. And
Okay. See, it's the kind of thing I don't remember. I mean, I did those things and then I haven't listened to them since.
oh
Uh,
man,
But if I mentioned him a lot, then it was because he was that pervasive in my life. See, here's
exactly.
Rick had a lot of friends.
Yeah.
A lot of friends. If I die tomorrow, there's one person coming to the funeral. No, wait a minute. There's nobody coming to the funeral except my wife. I was going to say one person, and then I was going to say Shecky, but unfortunately, he won't be able to attend.
Oh,
But he had different categories of friends.
yeah.
Okay, he had his work friends at Letterman. Okay, that made up a lot of his friendships.
Yep.
You know, and his best friend is Randy.
Yep.
You know, and he said it to me once. She's my best friend. You're my second best friend. I said, that's fine. I'll take second best friend.
Oh,
You know,
yeah,
because she's been wonderful for you. You know, she's been a good friend to you.
absolutely.
And he said, you know, so, but anyway, but his friends at work were one kind of friends. You know, he would
Yep.
get together with them every now and then, have lunch or dinner. They'd have a gathering because they miss each other because they saw each other every day and now they don't, you know.
Yep.
And so there was that group of people. Then there were his movie pals, his movie freak pals who were like collectors of movies and things like that.
Yep.
In fact, going back to the beginning of Rick and my relationship, I remember him taking me down to 7th Avenue, or maybe it was 9th Avenue and like 43rd or something. And all these film freaks trading reels of film out of the trunks of their cars to each other. And then after it was through, they would go to this little screening room that they had created in this old dilapidated building. And then they would sit there for the next 10 hours and watch movies. And they were always on film in those days. The tape, forget it. That wasn't part of the deal.
Yeah.
I remember going to this once, and I remember the cops raiding the place because they saw these guys going in there every Saturday and then coming out, and they figured it was a gay club. And it was just a bunch of guys with movies, you know.
It's a bunch of movie nerds.
Yeah, but I mean that was before Rick was even, you know, doing the Letterman show.
Okay, but that being said, the cops invading, it wasn't like copyright law and things like that. You know, we always saw the warnings at the beginning of every videotape about copying things and distribution and unlawful distribution. Back then, these guys and gals who would trade these films, they actually were kind of walking a real line.
They weren't walking it. They were doing something highly illegal.
There we go.
Because the movie companies said, we own those movies. If you have a copy of it, no matter whatever, you're violating our copyright. You're violating our ownership of that film. You had to own the film in order to have the rights to it.
Right.
So partially what they were dealing in was something that Rick became a very good resource for me on, was films that were in public domain. After so many years in those days, films would go into public domain, which meant they had no copyright anymore.
Yep.
Something like 26 years. It was a 13-year. You could renew it for another 13, you know.
Yep.
And so then there were some things, for instance, that were, and I learned all this from Rick, that weren't copywritten because somebody at the movie company screwed up. All right. Good example, the first 19 episodes of Star Trek.
Oh, man.
All in public domain. But you say, how come they can sue you still? And the reason they can sue you is because there's music in that show, and that music was copywritten.
You're kidding me.
Yes. But if you ran it without music, those first 19 episodes, I knew guys who were selling the first 19 episodes. You could buy them online, you know.
This is the kind of stuff that Rick, like what you just said there, is the kind of tidbits that Rick could tell you 5 of them in one conversation. But
I would always go to him for like, can I run this? Is it, you know, is it in public domain? And then he and I and Weiner started a show you're gonna on cable, because I was running Midnight Blue, and Rick, I, and Weiner did a show that only lasted about 3 or 4 episodes called Cinemania. And what we did is we took all the stuff that was in public domain and ran them on the show. You know,
You're kidding.
Old TV shows, old movies, things like that. And they'd all have a theme, you know, like one was like, here's TV, and then we'd run those. And then here's like, you know, this movie, that kind of movie, you know. So, and Rick would make copies of some of these things, and then I would edit them into the show, and we'd have this whole show called Cinemania.
Were the three of you on the show at all? Like, did you do intros or outros or anything like that? Or was it just the films themselves?
I think
and that was it?
I'm trying to remember. I may have done a narration. I don't know.
Wow.
You know,
if I knew that information, it had spilled out. So it's really nice hearing that again and actually having it recorded for, I love that.
Somewhere maybe in his tons of junk there at his house.
Yeah.
Maybe there is a copy of Cinemania somewhere there.
Oh man, that would be.
I certainly don't have a copy of it. Yeah.
So I want to get back to early on Letterman. Rick told me this story right as we were getting to know each other. It might have been actually the night that he told me about you. Because again, Western Canada, so I'm removed enough that my curiosities are all natural and I'm hearing these things for the first time, but also I know things too. And I think Rick appreciated that. I think. And so as he's telling me about you, he's telling me a few stories about, and I said, after I knew kind of who you were, I said, okay, well, did Alex ever make his way to 30 Rock? Clearly he was already kind of a New York fixture. You know, people knew who he was and that sort of thing. Did he ever make his way to 30 Rock and see you in the Letterman offices, you know, as these things started? And there's one story that he told me that is like kind of eclipses all others.
Go ahead and tell it. I know.
Well, I don't know what you two were doing that would cause this, but you were visiting Rick in his office. Right. And it was either language or stories or anecdotes that were being tossed back and forth. But apparently Dave poked his head in for whatever reason, ascertained something completely different than was going on, completely misread the relationship or the conversation. And then he went and called security thinking that Rick was in danger. Is that the deal?
No, because I was the guy he saw on cable TV on that sex show.
Okay, so he knew who you were.
Yeah, well, he knew somehow that I was the guy, and he said, isn't that guy from cable? And not knowing that, I saw a radio show at the time as well.
Right.
Yeah, but isn't that the guy from cable? And I think he asked Rick, do you need help here? You know, are you in danger? Like that. And he said, no. Yeah. And
I'm fine.
I always took that as a badge of honor that Dave thought I was like, you know, dangerous you know, or something.
Well, Rick delighted in it too, because it's one of the very first things he told me. And I liked that very, very much.
I went up there a couple of times, actually.
Yeah.
I remember one time standing out in the hallway, not going into the show, but standing out in the hallway. And I think Rick was with me. And then after the show was over, Dave coming out and just looking miserable.
Sure.
You know, because he's so, every time he ended a show, he would just walk out of there miserable. He would go upstairs and throw things and everything. Yeah. That, you know, he didn't believe in his own talent, you know. And in fact, Meryl, I had Meryl on my show years ago. And I said, what happened with you and Dave? She says, that's old boyfriend stuff. That's how she put it. And she said, I was producing his show and he was never happy with it. And there was only so much of that I could take.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, eventually I had to get out of the mix because I couldn't stand the fact that there's nothing I could do for that show that would make him happy.
Yeah.
You know, and Meryl's a great gal, man, the best. You know,
she is one of our dream guests, and I love hearing stories about her. And I love one of the things I loved about Meryl, and this is something that got Dave knocked it off early on. But one of the things that she loved, we were talking about the self-deprecation and things like that had kind of made their way into the fabric of the show. One of the things that made its way into the fabric of the show, but it went from spontaneous to more planned, looking like it was spontaneous, was the idea of pranks on the host, like where something would happen that the host was not ready for at all. And of course, the genius of Merrill, understanding that the genius of Dave is his reactions. His spontaneous reactions were many times the most entertaining part of any bit or segment or interview, whatever, what have you. And so she would play pranks on him that he wouldn't expect. And even though he was so good at it, you know, he said, okay, let's knock that off, because he didn't like the surprise. And this is getting back to Rick here. One day there's a sketch planned, and, you know, Carson was part of the sketch. Dave was the observer and the reactor to the sketch. That was the difference between the two. But there was a sketch planned where some sort of device of some sort, the shower copier, the shower fax machine, whatever it was, you know, there's a shower there, and Dave opens up the curtain and there's somebody showering, and there's a copier in there. Well, they got Rick naked, and he didn't know Rick was going to be naked. And it's very obvious when you see it, when you see him pull the curtain and he sees Rick. I love that bit, and that's pure Merrill to me right there. Is getting Dave.
You know, the best thing Merrill ever did, though, she was working for, I believe she was on a show produced by who's the documentary filmmaker? You know, God, my mind is just such a
on the
blank.
show itself.
Well, no, she was on another show. She had moved on.
Okay,
and she did a bit on this show. She said, "I've never considered myself a particularly glamorous woman,
right?
And I want to be. So I decided I would go to people who knew how to do it best." And she had a bunch of drag queens do a makeover on her. And when it was all over with, she looked just like a drag queen. It was, I thought it was one of the most brilliant pieces I had ever seen on television.
All right. After this ends, I'm going to find that. That's awesome. That's something I don't think that's hit my radar. And I always delighted when that happens.
The guy, he did that to Roger and Me. And
are you talking about Michael Moore?
Michael Moore, yeah.
Okay.
I can remember Michael and Me. I can't remember Roger Moore. Michael Moore.
Roger Moore. I want to talk about you a little bit more here. You know what? I want to bring up the radio personality, and forgive me for forgetting the name and forgetting where it was. I feel like it might have been in Texas and Houston. There was an incarnation of your show where you were the guy who was like the toughest host in the entire world and would take calls at a rapid fire rate. And if the person on the other end wasn't as sharp as a tack, they would get kind of a one-word answer from you. You'd hang up the phone and
this was a thing I did called quickies.
Yes.
And what I would do is I did it at the end of a show. You know, it was
okay. So this is okay.
Do at the end of a show, and everybody would call up, and you could only say something that was one sentence.
Yes.
No more.
Yes.
Less.
Was this in Houston?
No, I started it here in New York.
It was in New York. Okay.
And I did it, and you know, I would go quickies, and the guy would go, you know, like, I don't know. I can't even give you a good example. You know, I'm with him. Okay, down to the next guy. You know, and we did this. I did this as a regular thing, and then what was it? I guess I decided to stop doing it because other people were starting to do it.
There you go.
And I just didn't like the fact that once it had been stolen, it was like a girlfriend who had cheated on me. You know. And I never stopped doing it. I didn't start doing it again until I got to San Francisco. And later on in my incarnation in San Francisco, I started back up again. And I did it when I was at Sirius XM too.
Right.
I may not have started back up in San Francisco. No, I started up at Sirius XM.
Well, like and probably people who were tuning in to you at Sirius were nostalgic for the WMCA days or whatever.
And the fact that I just one day I said, why did I? You know, people, Hannity had stolen it.
Yep.
My good friend Alan Combs had stolen it. In fact, whenever we would get together, he'd always say, "Sorry about stealing quickies," you know. But I'm kind of doing it a little different. I changed the name of it. You know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I go, "Look, Alan, I love you. You can steal it. You know, it's yours. Do it all you want. You know."
Yeah.
But there were people who stole this. I think Hannity did it. I seem to remember Rush Limbaugh tried doing it once. You know.
Well, the problem is that his personality is basically that throughout the entire show, rather than just this one kind of segment at the end. Like he kind of was that antagonistic guy.
I was always looking for a perfect way to end a show, and that was a perfect way to end a show.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, okay. And so for those who listen to Life in the Passing Lane, somewhere along the way, probably early on, maybe in the New York run, you had a clip in there, like an extended clip of it, where it's like 2 minutes of just examples of it, where people would call you up, and then you'd have the, it wasn't good, that you had the insult, hang up, next. And every once in a while, somebody would say something clever enough where you would actually give them the time of day, and you'd have you'd give them a little bit of leash. But the moment that they got to the end of it, and I loved that. I love how you talk about the idea. This is how you are as a broadcaster. Dave, the same way. Jay took headlines, and then Dave immediately stopped doing things like that on the show. Some of the other things.
You have a tendency to not want to keep doing it, because my thought was, well, you want to steal it? Go ahead. I can come up with something else faster than you can think of one.
There you go. Yeah. And that's something that I appreciate both about you and about Dave. Again, not surprising to me that I would, and I came to it late, again, introduced to you by Rick, your sensibility in many ways, very similar to Dave's. I want to go back to 30 Rock for a second, because I can imagine the first time you went into 30 Rock, it had a different, like, I think of 30 Rock and how I feel about it. And for me, I associate it probably with Saturday Night Live. I think the images of it go back to that. I think that's where my mind as a Gen Xer goes. But you must have walked in there as a broadcaster saying, and I don't know how big their range is, but say it's a 100,000 watt tower at the top of, the old, is it the old RCA building? Is that what it is?
But there was never an antenna, I don't think, at the time.
No, okay, but it's a broadcasting mecca, right? To say the least.
30 Rock was RCA.
RCA, yes.
It was RCA. And that's all it was. I mean, it wasn't just, it was NBC, but NBC was part of RCA.
Absolutely.
But the whole building was the RCA building, is how they referred to it. It was 30 Rock. It was just a nickname that people started giving it, because the address is 30 Rockefeller Center. So it was basically the RCA building. It had a big RCA logo at the top. Then it became the GE building, and now it's the Comcast building.
30 Rock is kind of the iconic name that will never change, no matter who the owners who have the keys have.
The building. If you go into the lobby there, and anybody can actually, is just extraordinary.
Absolutely.
Just the artwork on the walls and everything. It's just it's awesome, just awesome.
Your journey took you to New York, and you talk about that. And in Houston, you were James Bond. That's who you were in Houston, right?
Yeah,
yeah, James Bond with a British accent talking to the Texans. I love that. That to me is old radio.
Well, I was working for a guy named Gordon McClendon. He hired his company hired me. A guy by the name of Don Keyes, who was the program director, actually hired me. And I got the job by sending them an audition tape as Percy McGuire, the Liverpool Lip. and I did it with the British accent and everything. And
Jewish kid from San Francisco, folks.
Yeah. And I gave my father's address as the return address. Okay. Because I didn't want them to nail me by having it come to Sacramento to a radio station. Okay? And my father calls me up and he says, "Do you know somebody named Percy McGuire?" And I said, "No." And actually, I wanted to, it should have been Percy McGuire, but I just didn't know what I was doing. And I said, "Well, why do you ask?" And he said, "Because there's a guy who's been calling me named Don Keyes from McClendon Broadcasting who wants to talk to him." And I said, "Do you have a number?" And he said, "Yeah, he left me his number." I said, "Okay, thanks, Dad. Yeah, that was me." And then I call up Don Keyes, and He said, I said, do you know where I can find Percy McGuire? I said, why do you ask? He says, well, we'd like to hire him down here in Houston, Texas.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what if I told you I was Percy? And he said, can you do a couple of bars of it? And I did the British accent. He says, you're hired if you want the job.
And whose idea was it to call you actually James Bond? That's a little on the nose.
What was the worst part about it is that they said, well, you're really good at this, but you can't tell anybody you're not British.
Yeah.
You can't
talk about a character.
So anybody, in other words, people became my friends in Houston, thought I was British. The deal was I couldn't let anybody know. And as time went on, I started losing the accent on the air. And by the time I completely stopped using it, people would come up to me on the street and say, you've lost your accent a little. Because they're all Texans, and anything that isn't, how y'all doing, it sounds British to them. So
did you pick up any Texan while you were down there? Did you pick up any of the colloquialisms or the accent?
No, but my wife did. My wife left Texas with a Texas accent.
There you go.
It's very easy to have happen because it's I don't want to say it's a lazy way of speaking. It's a relaxed way of speaking.
Sure.
And so it becomes kind of, it's kind of nice to just be able to talk like this, and there are terms that are very good terms because they're useful, like y'all.
Yep.
Y'all's a very good term, means everybody.
Yep.
In fact, the most interesting word that I got out of Texas, and I asked somebody why they used it, is they said, why do you, when you meet a woman, you refer to them as Ms. And he said, M-I-Z.
Yeah.
And I said, and he said, well, it's because you don't know whether they're married or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an easy way of not mistakenly calling them Mrs. or Miss.
Yeah, it's a catch-all.
Yeah. A couple of years later after this, Gloria Steinem starts a magazine called Ms. MS. And the reason was exactly that.
Yep.
So I often thought, people underestimate Southerners. They think they're stupid and everything else, but really they're very smart in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
there's a couple places I want to go with this. For sure. I love the asides that we're doing here, and I appreciate your time. Appreciate all of this. I want to talk about, your first run in New York. I think many people who remember, if they were to put things at the top to kind of sum up some of the things, John Lennon, I think, would be one of them. Abby Hoffman, I think, would be another. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you go back to San Francisco, and comedy is a huge part, and comedians is a huge part. When you were at New York the first time, and by the way, folks, when he left his New York radio job, when he was fired from it, again, you think about Howard Stern and some of these other people who create controversies. The next day, and we've had people who have written into this show that realize I have a connection to you. I've had people who write into me telling me they were in the crowd the day after you were fired. The thousands of people.
There's a little bit of a time.
Okay.
That was WMCA. They let me go. They let me go not because they didn't like the show. They didn't understand the show. And they had they had just taken on the New York Yankees, and they said, you're not going to be on that much during the year, so we're firing you.
Yeah.
And I left. And then the next day I heard there was going to be a little demonstration down the station. So yeah, I took the subway down, as I was living up in where was I living at the time? I'm trying to remember. I was living uptown.
Yep.
In Riverdale. And I take the subway down, and I get off, and then I go down the street, and then I look around the corner to see if anything's happening. And I see 1,000 people there.
Yeah.
Demonstrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it brought a little tear to my eye. Again, I had an influence on people that I meant something.
Yeah. There have been people who were in that crowd who have actually messaged the show.
Then I went to WPLJ, and that lasted for about 5 years, and then I wandered around. Finally, I went out to California.
Okay, so PLJ was after that. Thank you for that correction. Now, again, John Lennon, Abbie Hoffman, that kind of stuff. Were comedians and the comedy scene at all a part of your New York run at that point?
The New York show was defined by the fact that I was to begin with. The press referred to me as the youth guru.
Okay.
The youth guru.
And still are. Look at that.
Oh yeah. I'm the youth guru, all right. Oh boy, everything that used to go up goes down now. Anyway, I used to have on a combination of what we call social heroes like Abbie Hoffman, and
right,
and
John Lennon, I think, would be also in that category.
John Lennon,
absolutely.
John Lennon. I had John on once. I had Yoko on a lot, but he was on once. And then I would also I was the first person to interview music people, rock and roll performers. And to show you how difficult it was to get them, I would call up a record company and say, do you have anybody that would like to come on my shows, like one of your performers? And they go, you want to talk to a performer? Because nobody was interviewing them. They were considered like really dumb to interview. They didn't have anything to say or whatever. So I started making a giant component of my show, rock and roll people in the music business. And I had everybody. Elton John was on the show, and he was maybe the biggest. Well, all the Grateful Dead, I had all but one. And then they started smoking pot in the studio, and I got high as a kite. But anyway. That's another story.
Contact high with the Grateful Dead. Are you kidding me? That's a memory of, that's a legendary memory.
I had a lawyer once. I said, I'm running the show and I got a lot of counterculture people and so on, and music people coming in. What if one of them pulls out a joint and starts smoking? And the lawyer said, it's not incumbent upon you to tell them to stop.
Oh, I love that.
Just
legalese for permission. Let's do this.
Don't do it yourself.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. So when they all pulled out a joint. We had the studio that had tables. There were like about 7 tables, and they were all, one of them on each of the tables. And they all pulled out a joint at the same time. They started puffing away and blowing the smoke towards me.
Yeah.
And by the end of the hour, I couldn't even remember where I was. But, that was what I did in San Francisco. Now, if you say, well, what you did, in New York.
Yeah.
They say, well, when you got to San Francisco, you did a whole different thing. And I said, not really. I just specialized. That's all. Same specialization. I went from music to comedy.
Yes.
And then I became the king of comedy. I became the go-to guy I did the first radio show in America that had comedians on a regular basis,
including having an audience in the to the point where they renovated the studios. They built a chamber that would include an audience for you, and there were people who were diehards who would be dying to get into that audience every day, and you'd be having the top comedians of the day sitting across from you, having that witty banter, that repartee back and forth. And it was different.
I knew how to, and I also knew how to work with comics.
Yes.
Because I had a sense of timing myself, and I knew how to be the straight man. I didn't mind being the straight man. And that was the problem with anybody else who tried to imitate my show. They tried to be funny.
Yes.
And all I tried to do was I played straight man to these people. I would set their jokes up for them.
Okay, Alex, I got to make the comparison again. See, this is okay. So a month before Dave retired, that's where, this picture came from. That's where my relationship with Shecky came from. I went to the show, April 20th, 15. And Amy Schumer was one of the guests on the show. Now, 2 nights before, my wife and I are at the Comedy Cellar. Unbeknownst to us, Amy Schumer walks out. She does 15 minutes unannounced. She did a walk-on. It was fantastic. She left. 2 nights later, we're on the Letterman show. She sits down as a panelist, and suddenly her set at the Comedy Store, or at the Comedy Cellar, I apologize, at the Comedy Cellar 2 nights before starts coming out in the form of Dave just asking her straight man questions. Dave was just asking her questions, being the straight man, and she was just punchline. It was like set up, set spike.
Yeah.
Did you do that when the comedians came on the show? Did they give you, was there any prep, or was it just, here we go, let's have some fun, and you relied on their wit?
I never believed in prep, partially
Okay.
because I'm lazy as hell. And the other is because I want to be surprised.
Oh, yeah.
I want to, if somebody's being funny, I want them to be funny naturally.
Right.
I didn't want anything unnatural to happen. But if you tell them, well, okay, now I'll say this, and then you say that, and then we'll say this, and then you say that, it just doesn't come off the same way. I mean, my show is based entirely on spontaneity.
Right.
I wasn't afraid of it either, you know. So, you know.
Well, Dave's charm, I think, was making things like, you never knew what was spontaneous with Dave and what wasn't, and I because I would never have known that. So, and don't get me wrong, some of the routine, if you want to call it that, was definitely interrupted by spontaneity. I don't want to diminish what he did there, but the idea of having these people where they could relax a little bit and not worry about their routines and just go back and forth with you, and there would be entertainment there. You did this for years. Can you name, just to kind of show this time period to a lot of people who watch or listen to the show are stand-up fans. Can you name some of the comedians that you built a relationship with or had on the show at live back in the day?
Well, the people that I had on a regular basis were local San Francisco comics, which a lot of the people out there wouldn't even know. Larry Bubbles Brown, good example. Yeah, I think one of the funniest guys alive. You know, I mean, the opening line of his act is, somebody just stole my identity. Good for them. Now they don't have a life. I mean, it's that kind of stuff. Bobby Slayton, another great comic. Just, I think, one of the best stand-ups of our age. Yeah. But most people won't know of him because he didn't make it huge. He was always there, but he didn't make it huge. So there were a lot of people from San Francisco. Yeah. I had Robin Williams on once. Yep. Because I didn't like Robin that much because he stole jokes. Yeah. And I felt these comedians worked too hard getting material to have him go on the Tonight Show. Yep. Do the joke, and then they can never do it again because people go, oh, you heard Robin Williams do that on the Tonight Show. Mm-hmm. So he always knew I was a little down on him for that. Yeah. And I never quite forgave him for it, to be honest with you. There are stories of him he talked about how spastic he was, and things would just come out so rapid fire. There are stories of him finding out after the fact that he did that and realized it and sent money to the comedians who did their stories. Well, there was a guy by the name of Tim Thomerson down at the comedy store in L.A. Tim Thomerson, great comic, absolutely. Who Robin went up and started doing his act, and he was using some of Thomerson's lines. Yeah, and when he got off, Thomerson grabbed him, pushed him against the wall, and said, do not ever steal another joke from me. And Robin's wife was right next to him, with her checkbook out saying, how much do you want? Wow. I mean, what was it? They had a name for him at one point. I can't remember. There was a joke about, a fake name for him referring to his comedy theft, as it were. Tim Thomerson, I'm trying to remember the cowboy routine that he had. Oh, yeah, I know the routine you're talking about. One of the greatest things. We had Altman on the show, and I mean, Thomerson is again one of the guys who ran with Dave. I think it was just his parody of a Western. It was his parody of a Western, and it was not Rawhide, but it was something like that, where he was just doing the horse noise the whole time and would have these amazing spastic, the horse. He had a beautiful imitation of horses going, and these spastic lines that would just be put into it. And another one of the great comedians that most people don't even know existed. Absolutely. Well, we want to get Tim on this show very. I'm just going to say this: get well soon, Tim. Hope everything is going well, healing, and all that kind of stuff. Is he not well? No, I think he had. An injury that was being kind of rehabbed and fixed and all that. But at his age, that could be threatening. Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah, but we've had Altman on, and he's talked about him, and I think Tom Dreesen talked about him as well when he came on.
Tom Dreesen, man, oh man, I love Tom.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. When I met Tom, and I mean, this is a great example for me to say this. I say this anytime someone mentions Tom Dreesen to me. It's like, and no offense, Uncle Gary, sorry, buddy, but it's like discovering when you meet Tom Dreesen, it's like discovering your favorite uncle in the entire world, and you'd never known him up to this point, and you just met your favorite uncle. Well, I love Tom.
I had Dreesen on my show.
Yep.
And he said, "Why don't you come on down to the Circle Star tonight? I'll comp you a ticket, get you good seats right in the front.
Yeah.
And you can see Frank." You know, well, it's funny. I'd never seen Frank perform live, even though my father played with him.
I was going to say that astounds me because you were connected there with by your dad.
Well, I was at Cal Neva with my father sitting in the bar, and he just had gotten off doing the show with the Rat Pack. And then they all went into a little side room and they were there. But I never saw, I saw Frank Sinatra, but I never saw Frank Sinatra perform.
Right. I gotcha.
So I went down to see Frank Sinatra perform that night, courtesy of Dreesen. And he said, "No, I'll take you backstage and introduce you to Frank." And I'm going, Jesus, this is Nirvana, right?
Yes.
And he comes to see me. I'm sitting in my chair, and he says, "I'd take you back to meet Frank, but unfortunately, he isn't seeing anybody tonight because what's his name? God, my mind's a blank now. This happens to me a lot lately.
Yeah.
Because what was his best friend's name? Jilly. He said Jilly died today, and he doesn't want to really see anybody.
Oh my gosh.
So I didn't get to meet Frank, but I got to see Frank.
And Tom opened for him.
Yeah. And it was the saddest show I've ever been to.
He referenced it and talked about it during the show?
What? No.
Oh, he didn't. It was saddest because you didn't get a chance to see him, though.
No, it was so sad as to this one of the greatest pop singers that ever lived.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
No longer could do it. He was just, hitting clams like crazy. Occasionally the light would be just right, and he hit the note just right. And you go, I just saw Frank, The rest of the time it was pathetic. His son was running the orchestra. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Frank Jr.
And that night. And he at one point, Frank is singing "Make It One for My Baby, One More for the Road,"
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, very dramatically, takes a cigarette he's been holding in his hand and throws it down on the rug, which at the Circle Star Theater was a rug rather than a stage. It was a rug. And he puts his foot there and doesn't even put it out. His foot is to the right of it. And all of a sudden, as he's talking to the audience, the stage starts to catch fire. And Frank Jr. is yelling over, "Dad, the stage is on fire." So Frank then took his foot and put it out. But I mean, that was the nature of the show that night. It wasn't like seeing Frank. It was like seeing Frank Sauer. I don't know,
Little glimpses. Well, okay. So, arguably, not even arguably, from the numbers perspective, the highest, the biggest broadcaster in the world right now is a guy by the name of Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan talks about his days at the Comedy Store, and he talks about when he got to see Pryor. But when he got to see Pryor, he had come so far that it was Pryor who had just gone into the wheelchair.
Yeah.
And Richard still performed, and he talks about that the way that you talk about this with Frank. There even at that point, there were glimpses where you could see it, but it was so sad because what was.
By the way, here's another link to Shecky.
Yes.
At one point, Shecky said, "Here," and he handed me on 4 CDs, files of every song ever recorded by Frank Sinatra, including stuff that was completely bootleg.
So there's the archivist that is our friend Rick Scheckman right there.
I have every song Frank Sinatra ever recorded.
Does Tom know that?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, I'm going to tell Tom that.
It's illegal. I mean,
well, I mean, I feel like statutes of limitations now might be at a place where I'm going to tell Tom that, and because Tom's show, I want to get this happen. I want to make this happen somehow. I want to get to the point where I can kind of bring comedians here to Kelowna, because Kelowna is such a beautiful place, and we do have stand-ups that do come here. Like Bert Kreischer was just here, and we have a really nice theater. I want Tom to come up here and do his one-man show about Frank. And I don't know if you've seen this or heard about this, but Tom, because Tom in many ways is the last vestige of this. And he comes in and they have a little setup where there's a bar and a screen in behind him. Frank comes up and sings a song, and then Tom goes and does a bunch of material and tells stories about Frank Sinatra all night. And it's an entertaining show. I want to see it live. I love that we're talking about this, and I love that you made that Shecky connection, because he is one of the greatest archivists ever. You know, like when you have a guy like Don Giller tip his hat to Rick Scheckman, you understand.
Well, I mean, Shecky was a great archivist, but more than that, he was a great historian. I think that's a better place to put him.
Yes.
You know, and the fact is, though, he never, you know, the thing that bothers me is that all his life he had gained this infinite amount of knowledge about movies. He really wasn't very good at movies or modern movies, like, you know.
Right. Yeah, totally.
But the old movies, he was an expert at silent films and films in the 40s and 30s and, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But he never, ever wrote a book, put it down on paper, or anything like that. So here's this whole life of filling your brain with this infinite amount of knowledge.
Yeah.
And then you die. And what did it matter?
You know, it's funny. You just basically, we talk about transfer of knowledge a lot on this show, because
whereas his friend Leonard Maltin put out books and blah, 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 blah. And Malton's very knowledgeable in much the same way Shecky is. In fact, Maltin was one of his closest friends.
Yes.
And you know, Shecky never wrote a book.
No.
Shecky never did anything like that. All he had were a bunch of DVDs and films in his basement and, you know, things like that.
Well, he built a company around it. He did do that. And that company is, in my understanding of things, going to continue on, correct?
Well, the company he wasn't the only owner of the company. Mark Trost, his close friend.
Right.
His business associate for years.
Yes.
Runs the company. You know, it's one of these, if you need a film clip or something, you get a hold of these guys and they'll find it for you.
Yes.
But, you know, it's just, you say, so you get all that knowledge, you know, like me, I get all this, whatever skill that I had. And then as I get older, it either fades away or I die before it fades away. And then the question is, what was that? Like Marlon Brando said on his deathbed, what was that all about? You know, I mean, what did all that gaining that knowledge, you know, Shecky never shared it with anybody else. I mean, on a wide scale.
No, anecdotally though, he did. And that's one of the things that many people who love him loved, were all of the tidbits or the things that he would share with people. But you're right. He didn't do it corporately. He didn't do it in a way where, like in a book.
He didn't do it in a way where it could be, you know, a museum somewhere. Or
yes,
whatever,
exactly.
You know?
His mind is a museum. Like,
and that's the thing that bothers me the most, because I go, what did his life become? It became a bunch of DVDs that are likely to wind up in a dumpster.
Oh, let's hope not.
Well, I mean, they're not worth anything.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, there are some in there, if you knew how to pick them correctly. I mean, I could go there and probably say, hey, you can throw this away. The 800,000 people have this one.
Yeah.
You know, and there's some that he got that were like one of a kind or whatever. Yeah. Those, but you have to separate them out, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, the question is, what happened to all that? What happened to his films were, he sold them to the Library of Congress.
Yes.
So at least there is a Rick Scheckman in the Library of Congress.
Which I love that, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, I think he did it not so much because he wanted to give the Library of Congress good films, but he wanted to make $250,000.
I was going to say they made it worth his while to do that as well.
Yeah, yeah, and
I love
also the fact that he had access to them anytime he wanted them.
Yep.
And and the last part of that is that he also had copies of all of them.
Yeah.
As digital files, so it didn't matter. Okay, you want to pay me $250,000 for this? Great, I'll take it.
I love anytime, because I'm a collector. And Rick and I, that's just part of the, somebody said, actually it was Don Giller who said this on your show a couple of weeks ago, how Rick had many orbits, and you referred to that, but he used the term orbits. I love that. Rick and I, we got together in our friendship through a loving of professional wrestling, a loving of comic books, sports memorabilia. We were just different eras. And I loved listening to him tell his stories and whatnot. I was a receptacle for that. I loved the transfer of knowledge there. And then he would ask me about things happening currently in comic books or things. But I'll tell you this, as a collector, I love hearing any story of a collector actually getting paid off for something, because so many times we collect stuff and it doesn't mean anything.
These were films that he owned illegally.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So it's wonderful. But many times he became the only resource. I mean, I'm trying to remember what show that NBC did. And they didn't have the first hour with sound.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember what the show was.
Oh, it was someone big too. Like, it wasn't Sinatra, but it was someone, I thought it was something really big, or like it was like a Bob Hope something, or it was a big deal, whatever it was.
I remember now.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
It might have been Our Town with Frank Sinatra, but I don't know if it was that. But anyway, they didn't have this. They only had the second hour of it.
Yeah.
The second reel of it. And Shecky said, too bad they didn't call me. I've got the first reel with sound downstairs. So,
I want to go back to comics for a second. Oh, here, this is a completely random one.
It might have been Humphrey Bogart in the television version of The Petrified Forest.
Wow.
Yeah, and he had like the first hour with sound. I think something like that. Yeah.
Bogart, it was something really big like that.
Yeah, but anyway, I was going to say, you would talk about Shecky and these orbits. Then he had his Letterman orbit.
Yeah.
And he had his film friends orbit. Then he had his family orbit. His brother out in Steamboat Springs.
His nieces who he loved.
His nieces who adore him. There's that. And then there's a small little group that a lot of these people don't even know exist. I'm one of them. And Weiner's another one. Steve.
Yeah.
That we were just friends. That's it.
Yeah.
We're just friends, not associates. We were not friends that he got through film, Yeah. There are a lot of those, or through Letterman, or through his family, just friends. And I can only name two of us, myself, and our friendship has been extraordinary over the years.
Yeah.
And it just never ceased. It never went away. There wasn't a time when Rick wasn't in my life for the last 45 years.
Yeah.
What a beautiful statement. And it becomes, like Stephen King says, there are no happy endings. It's only when the author decides to stop the story, because the ending, of course, is death for all of us. But it is beautiful for you to say that 45 years. Mm-hmm. I want to finish with the. We could say whatever, we can talk about whatever we want still, but I want to finish with Bill Hicks, because I think it sums up much of the connection with all of these things together, talking about the Bill Hicks story. But before I do, I want to ask this. Do you have any memories of Andy Kaufman? Did Andy Kaufman ever cross paths with you at all?
No.
Okay.
Andy Kaufman, the only story I have about Andy Kaufman is there was a guy by the name of Monty Hoffman that I knew, who told me that the day before he had been walking past a club in Haight-Ashbury called the Other Cafe. God, I'm remembering more things than I'm forgetting. And he said he saw Andy walking down the street, and he walked over and he said, "Hi, Andy, how are you?" And he says, "I'm dying." He said, "Really?" And he said, you know, the worst part about it is
Didn't believe him.
nobody believes me.
Yeah.
And that's otherwise I never met Andy Kaufman.
Rick and I bonded over professional wrestling as well. And you talk about you as a broadcaster, professional wrestlers as what they do, especially back then, what they did, because it was so, the character was so important. Andy Kaufman, same thing. You talk about him as a comedian, the performance artist, how he, in wrestling, they call it live the gimmick.
Mhm.
And you talk about a guy like Andy Kaufman, that guy lived the gimmick when it came to what he did. And I just appreciated that about him. Shecky had lots of Andy stories, and boy, did I love hearing those. I would get him to retell the stories.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I want to talk about Hicks. You know, you did such a, I appreciate the fact that you were a little bit modest about the people who were on your show when you were in San Fran, but you had the biggest comics of the day.
Basically, there are very few comics that didn't make it to my show.
Yes. Okay. I'm glad you said that, because like
some of them only one time and they didn't want to come back again, you know, but
yeah, well, you know, you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Because
Right.
some comics are really canned when it comes to that stuff. They're very scripted, and what you were describing, the loose feeling where wit and charm certainly comes to the forefront, but also I would imagine a lack of wit and charm. We try and keep the show only positive, but I'm certain that there was more than one person who was more than one way, where they came on as a guest and you're like, what a dud. They may be funny on stage, but maybe not. Perhaps.
Well, the worst on my show in San Francisco, the worst kind of comedian I could have was a comedian who came on my show and did material.
There you go. Yes.
In other words, he was looking for it's this nice sunny day. Well, the funny thing about sunny days is, you know, I mean, I always hated those. I like people who could work off the top of their head and be funny.
Yes.
Or realize they didn't have to be funny all the time. You know, I mean, that's one of the rules. You don't have to be funny all the time. All you have to do is be fun. Okay. And that's easier than being funny.
I think about, oh, you know what? I got to ask you about this then, because, okay, you talk about that.
And by the way, I didn't invent that line. I got it from Steve Allen. I thought it was great advice. You know.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, that's cool that you would reference that too.
However, the worst guest I ever had on my show was Steve Allen. Mickey Rooney was the other one. Mickey Rooney was the other one. Oh my God, Mickey Rooney, what a mess that was. God. And you know, if Judy had just called me, she'd be alive today. Thank you very much. You know, I'll tell you a quick story about
please. Oh God, please, Alex.
Mickey Rooney. So we're doing our show from LA.
Yep.
Okay. And the night before, I've been watching TV in my hotel room. And it was the Joan Rivers show. You remember the Joan Rivers show?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, legendary in comedy.
And her guest was Mickey Rooney.
Yeah.
And Mickey Rooney comes out and completely hijacks the show. And I said, it's the only time I've ever felt sorry for Joan Rivers. I said, he's the worst guest you could possibly have on any show. Now I'm doing the show from the ABC studios in LA. We've been doing a week in LA of shows.
Yep.
And I'm doing my show. I got some comics and stuff there. And we're talking about this. We're talking about that. And I look in the control room, and there's my producer, Christy Frazier. Now, and then Andrade, and I don't know what her name is now, but Christy. And who's she talking to in the control room but Mickey Rooney?
Oh boy.
And I'm thinking to myself, please, God, please don't let her make the worst mistake ever and bring him in here. And the next
you're watching a hijacking in progress right there.
Next thing I know, Mickey Rooney is sitting in front of me. Okay, oh, no. The door's open. He walks in, sits down, and now he starts in. It's the same stuff I heard on the Rivers show, right? And if Judy had just listened to me, she'd still be alive, and whatever. And, he's not being funny. He's just an absolute pain in the ass, completely has hijacked the show. And over his shoulder, I could see the face of a comedian who was a good friend of mine, Bob Rubin, very funny comic. And he's just looking at me doing this. And I'm starting to laugh. And Rudy thinks it's because I'm laughing because of what he's saying.
Oh,
it's encouraging him.
Yeah.
But it was just, it was god awful. And it's very hard to get rid of a guest sometimes, because you realize suddenly that guest is terrible.
Right.
In your case, you can do an interview with them, and if it isn't any good, you just don't run it. Right.
I've been blessed to not have that experience on this show, but on my other show, I certainly have. So I know what you're talking about.
I had what's his name on my dinner with Andre, Princess Bride. What's his name?
Chris Guest.
No,
not Chris. Sorry, Rob Reiner.
No, it's despicable.
Oh, the guy who played
Inconceivable.
Fassini.
Huh?
The guy who played Fassini on Princess Bride.
Yeah.
Inconceivable. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's
anyway. I had him on, and I was looking forward to him because I loved his work.
Yeah,
and he's very funny. I think he's very funny. He has a funny voice, is what it is.
Definitely.
And he comes on, and he is just deadly dull. Now he's a great actor. I love his work. I've always felt his work was terrific. What's his name? God damn it.
I'll find it while you go. You keep going.
Yeah,
you keep going.
Anyway, so he is just god awful boring. So you kind of then say, well, hey, listen, thanks for dropping by. And he looks at me and says, I wasn't good enough. He says this on the air.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, you were fine. Now let's keep going. So we kept going, and it was the most boring half hour I ever did on radio.
Wallace Shawn.
There
we go.
What a great, sweet guy. God, you didn't want to break his heart. When he
was
went,
I not good?
I wasn't good enough. Oh my God, that's the worst thing that can happen.
Going back to Mickey Rooney for a second.
The worst thing that can happen
Yeah.
to a host on a show is when somebody, whether it's a guest or a caller, somebody like that, and you do something and they start crying.
Oh, yeah.
Something you said, you can't look good. You just have to cringe and go under the table. You know? And that's what happened with Wally. I just, I wasn't good enough. Oh, geez. Oh,
back to Mickey Rooney for a second, just to show the generational thing. Whenever somebody says anything to Mickey Rooney to me, well, I guess now it's kind of, it used to be, my wife loves Breakfast at Tiffany's. And so now every time we watch it every Christmas and a couple times a year, because I love doing that with my wife.
Nothing like Mickey Rooney playing a Japanese guy. That isn't
there you go.
At all, is it?
There you go. It was a different time. But where my mind used to go before we started watching this every year was Dana Carvey's impersonation of him on Saturday Night Live, which was, I was the biggest star in the world. And he would do it. Oh my God. That growing up, that's actually how I knew Mickey Rooney was that persona.
If people watching us remember Mickey Rooney, Mickey Rooney at one point in his career was, for 5 years running, I think, the biggest star in the world.
Yes.
The biggest star in the world.
Yep.
It's pretty hard to come down from that.
Yes.
And what you saw in the end with Mickey Rooney was him coming down from that.
Very much so. I think, I'm glad you put it that way. So let's go to Bill Hicks, because Bill Hicks was, at the time, I mean, I don't know which comic it is now, but you think about guys along the way. Pryor's definitely one. Carlin is definitely one.
Here is the best way I describe Hicks to people.
Okay.
All my life, people have gone ever since his death.
Yeah.
Saying, oh, this guy's the next Lenny Bruce. And I saw Lenny perform live in San Francisco on at least one occasion. And I knew what Lenny was like, and I was a fan of Lenny's, and I knew what Lenny did. And I'm sorry, just because a guy, Sam Kinison comes along, oh, he's the next Lenny Bruce. No, he's not. No, he's not. You don't understand what Lenny did. You have to have a certain outrage at the world around you, and then you have to report it on stage. And when I met up with Hicks, I said, my God, this is the closest we've come to a new Lenny Bruce.
What a compliment coming from you, who is, not by, at the very minimum, an expert level, because you're in it, broadcasting about it, you're in it, interacting with it. So for you to say that, that's a powerful, powerful statement. And Hicks was that.
Yeah. And the last time I ever saw Hicks alive was at the Punchline in San Francisco in the back room where the performers waited to go on.
Yep.
And I went back and to say hello to him. And I said, how you doing, Bill? I hadn't seen him in a couple of months.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, I don't know. He says, this is like one of my last performances. I'm quitting comedy. Well, what it was, he knew he was dying, and he had already gotten the verdict, but he wasn't about ready to say it to anybody.
Yeah.
And he just said, I'm quitting. I'm just getting out of the business. And I said, what? Said, how could you get out of the business? I said, you're one of the best that ever was.
Yeah.
And you're not even that good now compared to what you're going to be in another 10, 15 years.
Yes.
Of practicing your craft. You're just incredible.
Yeah.
And he went, yeah, but I'm quitting. And I didn't know then that the reason he was quitting was because he had about 6 months to live. And then I was in New York. This is how the story comes full circle.
Yeah.
I'm in New York. Some reason, I guess I was at Caroline's going to see a friend of mine who was going there to look at the place because they were performing there that night.
Yeah.
And somebody at Caroline said, did you hear Bill Hicks died? And I said, really? He died? He said, what of? He says, it was pancreatic cancer. And he's had it for a long time and knew he had it. And he went back to Texas and hung out with his mom, and then he died. And the first person I thought to call was
Shecky.
Mm-hmm. So I call Shecky and I go, did you hear about Bill Hicks? And Shecky's first words out of Shecky's mouth was, what did he do now? And I said, he died. And Shecky just, what? And I said, yes, Bill Hicks is dead. And then he went and told Dave.
Yeah.
So every time I think, maybe Shecky and I didn't know each other that well. There's just another Shecky story, of some place that has impacted my life, whether it's that story or my wife and I saying, hey, we got married, or, this thing or that thing, or the fact that Ed Hall slept on my couch while he was, doing what happens is over in the Presidio, this place called the Letterman Hospital. So he was taking photographs. I think he was just in San Francisco on a vacation, but he was taking photographs of that so they could use them on the Letterman show.
Yeah.
But I remember Shecky was with him, and, I just all these things in my life where Shecky was always there.
Yeah.
And I know that I meant a lot to Shecky.
Absolutely.
Because the stories that get back to me is that, Randy was saying as she was taking him in the ambulance to the hospital this last time, he went, I've got to get back by Monday to do the show. I kind of was stunned by that. Here you are, you're at death's door in many ways, and all you can think about is getting back in time to do the show. So what I meant to him was far more. I think he never expressed what I meant to him. He wasn't that sentimental a person, but
he did it to other people though, because all I know is how he, like, my initial, within 2 or 3 interactions with him, he told me about what you meant to him. Like, you were one of the brightest shining stars in his whole life. He loved you.
See, I never had that feeling.
Because you guys just interacted like it was all, like you said.
He was just my friend. He was just my friend.
Yes.
And I didn't realize, you only realize after 45 years that Yeah, he's been a friend. How many people can I name that I knew 45 years ago that I'm still talking to, or that even mattered to me? But this guy did, and it's such a shame. I wish he had taken better care of himself.
Yeah.
There's a part of me, there's this kind of remorse you get when somebody dies, in which you go, God
I'm
damn,
feeling it too.
why didn't you get mad at them? Why didn't you take better care of yourself? And there were extenuating circumstances to his death, and it had to do with certain proclivities that he had medicinally.
Yeah.
Didn't help.
No.
Okay.
No.
He died I think, from complications of a condition.
Yes.
But it was so early, and it was not what I expected.
None of us did. We all thought he was going to pull through. All of us. There wasn't one person that thought this is like where my misplaced anger or rage, it doesn't go to him for taking care of himself. I can see that. It was more the hospital visit 3-4 months ago, whatever it was. Why didn't we start being proactive at that point? And instead of just charging him and sending him like that was the part where I get angry about that.
I tell the story, and you don't see clues when they're right in front of your face.
Yeah.
Okay. Shecky was never forthcoming about any condition.
No. It was like pulling teeth, asking him, "Hey, how you feeling today?" And to get him to actually, he tried.
The last time I ever talked to him, it was after our show.
Yeah.
I used to call him every time the show was over.
I love that.
I
love that you did a post-mortem with Shecky every Monday. I love that.
After the show.
Yeah.
I had to make sure I had my cell phone here so I could call immediately. I tried to see how fast I could do it.
Yeah.
But the last thing I said to him, "So how you feeling?" And he said, "I'm feeling pretty good. I'm okay. I'm a little tired most of the time, but I'm okay."
Yeah.
So I took that, what are you going to say? You look like crap.
No.
I mean, the last time I saw him, he wasn't walking too well.
Yeah.
He's walking like an old man. But the thing is that what I said to him was, he had accumulated a pretty decent amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it had to do with his brother, who made good investments for him, and the fact that he didn't spend it much anywhere. He went on cruises occasionally, but that was it.
Yeah.
That and DVDs.
Yep.
So I said to him, I said, you're well to do. I said, "You have a will, don't you?" And he says, "No, I don't." And I said, "Well, if I were you, I would write one." I said, "The reason being that you got this chunk of money that you say you have." I didn't know how much he had or didn't have.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
I said, "But
never mind the collectibles too, by the way.
If you don't have a will,"
yeah,
I said, "all that stuff is going to the state. It's going to lawyers. It's going to everybody else, but the people you would like to see get it."
Yeah.
So, it'd be good for you to have a will. So for, I guess, maybe a year, I was bugging him about it every now and then, going, so he said, "Well, I'm thinking about seeing a lawyer." Every time he would bring it up, And finally, he said to me, "I went to a lawyer today." And he said, we got together all the information, and he's going to write the will, and then I'll go in next week and sign it. And he went in the next week, and he told me the next time I talked to him, "I just got the will, I signed it."
Oh, no kidding.
He even told me where he put it. I can't remember now. I have no idea where he put it.
Sure.
Because it passed by me like this. And so,
okay,
you made a will. And I think I said to him at the time, "Yeah, you made a will, but I hope you live long enough that I'm never going to have to find out what's in that will, because you're going to be here long after I'm gone."
Yeah.
But it's just good that you have it, and that people are going to get it, who remember it, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And I was happy that he had done it.
Yeah.
Just for him, because I didn't want to see. It was my only really decent advice to him. Well, if I had looked at it in retrospect, the fact that he did it all of a sudden, and they went and did it, and went and saw the lawyer and all that, should have said something to me.
Yeah, exactly.
About his health.
Yeah.
that one of those doctor's appointments, some doctor might have said something to him like, you aren't long for this world.
Yeah.
You know, but he would never share that with me.
No.
And the only indication I had is he had a will made up finally after all that time of nudging him about it, and not for any personal reasons. I for benefit of him, I knew of all this stuff forget about the money, the stuff he owned,
the collectibles, absolutely,
the collectibles and all of that, and that all of that, you know, should be taken care of.
Definitely.
Because it's not like some people, you know, got a little, like me, I got a bunch of crap around here. Okay. What am I leaving behind?
No, he had a bunch of important crap around.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you want the DVDs in back of me? Hey, they're yours when I go. You know? I mean, but, and there was no personal reason why I wanted him to have a will.
No,
I wanted him to have a will because I didn't want to see all this stuff wind up, as he once put it, in a dumpster outside outside the house.
Exactly.
You know, and so I'd bug him about it every now and then. And when he did it, it didn't occur to me that there was a reason why he did it all of a sudden. But I think there's something he knew we did not know.
Yes.
Or we weren't. It's not that we didn't know it; we weren't being made aware of it.
Exactly.
So.
I totally agree with that. I think he downplayed it whenever people asked him about it. And I think that helped give us that feeling that, oh, whatever it is, they'll figure it out and they'll get past it.
I mean, I knew he was going to see doctors and things like that, but they weren't doing much for him. They thought he had anemia. They were giving him blood transfusions.
Yeah.
Must have been one of those doctors who suddenly figured out what it was.
Yeah.
You know, but he wasn't sharing that with me. He wasn't sharing that with anybody. I don't know if he shared it with Randy. I don't think he probably even shared it with Randy. I mean, Randy knew that he was ill. I knew that he was ill. He was passing out a lot, you know, but we knew there was something wrong. You could look at him and say, hey, you know, he's walking like an old man. There's something a little bit wrong here, but you didn't think that would result in what it resulted in. I mean, that 1 week I've got him on my show and the next week he's dead.
Exactly.
You know, so I mean, it was. I just, you know, every day it doesn't get better; it gets worse.
Yeah,
actually, because initially I said, you know, the wonderful thing about me is I'm stoic about this kind of stuff.
You and I talked about this. Yeah, I think that's the broadcaster in you.
Somebody dies, I get very stoic about it.
I think that's the broadcaster in you coming out, man. I think that's your training.
I think it's the way I am. My father died, I didn't cry. But then I was told when I was asleep that night, I did cry.
Yes.
And a year later, when I wanted to talk to my father about something and realized he wasn't there anymore, I broke down. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the breaking down that I do is later on, not there, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I was at the hospital and there he was on life support, basically. Yeah. And I looked at it and I went, it's a shame, but that's not Shecky. You know, that's not, well, who is Shecky? Shecky's somebody I can talk to.
Yeah.
You know, and now Shecky is a memory. I mean, a lot of good memories.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we traveled across the United States together in a car.
Yeah. Which, by the way, you talk about in Life in the Passing Lane a lot. Because I have memories of that because of you sharing those memories. And I'm really grateful that you did.
Yeah. He is, on one hand, a great person to drive with because he plays navigator. He sits in the other seat and turn left here. Oh, there's a traffic, you know, traffic jam up there. Here, turn left here. Go here. Yeah. Go. Very good. Very good at that. The other part that makes him a terrible person to travel across the country with, sometimes he would completely shut down.
Yeah.
And become uncommunicative for
Talk about a guy who is comfortable in his own skin, though. He could be silent, you know,
Yeah, just completely silent. Yeah. And the one thing Shecky said he always liked about me is that actually he said, you could move in with me. He said, because you understand when to leave me alone. And it was true. I always knew that, hey, now's the time we don't talk to Shecky. And now's the time it's not going to help to talk to Shecky right now. You know, other people go, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's that? You know, just, So miles and miles and 100 miles, and finally he would start talking to me. You know, but that was, those were the things I loved about him. And we went to Graceland together, and we went to Sun Records, and the Danny Thomas St. Jude's Hospital. Yeah, because we wanted to see the glass coffee table if it was there. That's a joke that I will not explain, folks, but it has to do with the peccadillo that Danny Thomas had.
Peccadillo, I love that.
Well,
word.
the whole story was he used to like to have here.
Talk about performance art.
This kind of comes full circle too. Danny Thomas had a certain peccadillo, supposedly, that he liked to have a glass coffee table and hire hookers to come take a dump on the glass coffee table while he laid under it. That's the rumor.
Mm-hmm.
I just say it's rumor because I don't want to get sued by St. Jude's Hospital. He did a wonderful thing there, by the way. So,
Yep.
But so the big joke was when we went there was Shecky said, "Where's the glass coffee table?" But he wanted to go there because that's where Danny Thomas was buried, not because it was St. Jude's Hospital.
Absolutely.
Well, my good friend Karen Babbitt, whose father was Art Babbitt, who was a animator for Disney, was one of the originals, 9 or something they call them. And I don't know if I've had Shecky ever meet her. But Art Babbitt he did the evil queen in Snow White. That
wow.
was and
Talk about
dancing,
iconic.
The dancing mushrooms was his animation.
Iconic.
Iconic. And then he's the guy that led the strike against Disney and was ultimately pushed out after the strike was over because he was a troublemaker, right? But that's how I come full circle with Shecky, because I knew Karen Babbitt and he liked that, I'm just going to miss him. I'm going to miss him for so many reasons, and they're so simple, and it's not like, if his film friends got together, they go, "Oh, I just love talking about movies with him," and blah, 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 blah. And the people at Letterman, "Oh, he was great to work with." But in my case, it's just miss those little stupid conversations we had,
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I miss talking about
and he loved the show you're doing. He said you're a very good interviewer.
Man,
I said, "Are you saying that to make me feel bad?"
Well, and I talked about this in the tribute episode we put out, where I just kind of talked to camera, and it was sort of therapy for me more than anything. And like a lot of people don't know, I had a conversation with him about a week or two before the first show came out. And I said, "Look," I'm really going to do this. And he encouraged me the whole time. Never doing anything for me. He always made me do the work. But would help along the way, provide me with an email address or provide me with this. And if I emailed the person and copied him on it, he would then throw an endorsement out there or whatever. And he would give me notes after every show. But beforehand, this show would not exist if it wasn't for Rick Scheckman, because I said to him, and it was a Godfather reference, and I referenced this before, but I said to him, in all seriousness, I didn't know a better way of describing what I was looking for. I said, I need a Tom Hagen. I need a consigliere. Yeah. And Rick, in all seriousness, came down to my level, because I'm a goofy guy and I know we talk comics and DC animated shows and stuff, but he came down to my level and I said, "Look, I said it in all earnestness, I need a Tom Hagen." And he said, "Mike, I'm there for you. It's not a matter of doing the show or anything. I'm there to help you do this, and I will help counsel you." And he gave me notes at the beginning, and the last 10 or 15 episodes, he didn't give me a note except for saying it's really good.
The first time I heard about you was Rick said to me, I said, "I think you called the show or something." And I said, "Who is that guy?" And he says, "Don't take this wrong."
I'm not going to.
They said, "He's a fanboy."
Yep.
Yeah, he's a fanboy. He said, but he's not a pain in the ass fanboy.
Oh, it hits me right in the heart. It makes me feel so good.
Occasionally he can be, but he's not a pain in the ass.
I am. I'm an annoying puppy dog, is the way that I've been described.
Yeah. That's very, very, very good.
Well, and
that's where, when he invited me on your show, and I don't know if he's ever invited other people onto your show or not, but he invited me on there. I think he was vetting me, because I think there was a part where he was like, okay, is this guy for real or not? And it was well over a year that I
yeah, but I think, I think he really liked you,
Sure.
He's always a little, I don't know how to describe me. Rick could be a real pain in the ass sometimes, but that's why somebody's a friend of yours. They can be a pain in the ass and you don't hold it against them.
Yes.
You just ignore them for that, for a whole day while they're being grouchy. He got very grouchy towards the end.
Yeah. Surly Rick was funny though.
Rick was very funny.
Surly Rick was really funny too, though. Like when he was complaining against something like what DC Comics was doing now compared to what they used to do or whatever, I would love to talk to him about that stuff. I loved when he would, kind of lament and then talk about the old days and things like that. And he was always really funny talking about it.
I'll make you have an orgasm. You know that I was the MC at the Comic Book Awards one year?
Yes, I did know that.
Because I was invited to do it by Stan Lee.
Oh, that is just.
And then I was invited by Stan Lee to be a part of the cast of a show he did at Carnegie Hall, where people would read the various characters in comic books, and I was Dr. Doom.
Oh, I didn't know that one.
Yeah.
Oh, that is.
My mother was still alive. I called her from backstage at Carnegie Hall and said, guess where I am?
Oh.
And she said, where? I said, I'm about ready to go on stage at Carnegie Hall. And she just went, what? That was a big thrill in her life.
I'm covered in goosebumps right now. I got to ask about that show now. Okay. Did Stan narrate? Was Stan's role?
I can't remember. It was so long ago. I just remember that.
Because his voice.
Huh?
Like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends growing up.
Stan Lee. It was Stan Lee Presents. Somebody, I have it here, sent me the sign outside Carnegie Hall for that. And it was Stan Lee Presents, or A Night with Stan Lee and Marvel Comics, or something like that.
Well, here's the cool thing.
So he had to go Monday, on stage. Yeah.
One Monday when I'm on your show, you'll have found it and you're going to show it to me on the show. And that's one thing I want to say how, and I mean, we're almost 2 hours here. I love you and I'm so grateful for you. I wouldn't know you if it wasn't for Rick Scheckman. I am really grateful that one of the legacies, you throw a rock in the water and these pools, continue on, these ripples continue on. One of the ripples is that I get to be on your show as long as you're going to do it. And I get to know you.
One of the ripples is I get to be on yours.
Oh, you're a sweetheart for saying that. I can't wait till you find that on a show on Monday. You show it. If people want to find you, Gabnet is the best way to do it because you're on.
Well, you can find me at 1925 7th Avenue, apartment 8I. That's one place you can find.
Go to Harlem, folks.
Gee, folks, yes, I just gave out my address. So what? So what? You want to steal stuff from here? Great. Come on. I'll hand it to you out the door, okay? What do you want? One of these DVDs in back of me? Be my guest, So
Gabnet.net, right? And you're
Gabnet.net, yeah. That's where
the show that I'm on every Monday is not political at all. It's just a bunch of friends that get together and just panel and we just shoot the shit, right?
And I do that at 4:00 and put it out over Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay, because I can just do a direct thing to Facebook for that.
And then it goes on YouTube after the fact.
Yes, it goes. We put it on YouTube after the fact, right?
Yeah. So for people who want to see Rick Scheckman, you literally have a weekly archive of Rick coming on this show for years.
Well, I don't know. I don't have those shows. Those shows are only archived for a couple of weeks. I mean, I have them. But they aren't in. You can't get a general, idea of it. You managed to download a copy before. I mean, I could have just sent you a copy.
Well, don't we go onto YouTube though? On YouTube, I go back and the pop-ups are there.
You're right. You are absolutely correct. Yes.
Yeah, that's how I've been accessing it. I've been going onto YouTube and
after I post them there, they're permanently on YouTube.
Yeah. But live is so fun. it's fun
Wherever
talking
you
to
wherever
you
you
guys.
see, go back about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Well, go back a week ago, because on Friday we did a show which was a tribute to Rick.
Yeah.
And just go down wherever you see pop up, just open that up, and there Rick probably will be on that show.
Yeah. Well, the past few, when you talk about him liking the Letterman podcast, the past few shows, he actually would interrupt whoever was talking and actually give a shout out. Oh, by the way, here's my obligatory shout out to Mike and to me. And again, hindsight being 2020, I knew he was sick, but you know, he also had a trip plan. Like right now, he was just supposed to be coming back.
I didn't know how sick he
cruise.
was, because he was about ready. In fact, the reason why he actually didn't go on that cruise, because he passed out and was found by Randy, right? And he never got to the boat. He never got to Florida.
He didn't get to Florida.
Yeah. And so when he was planning stuff like that, he had stuff planned for next year or for later this year.
Exactly.
Like to go to Pordenone in Italy for this festival that was there. And he had a lot of these various things he was planning. So the fact that he was planning them, that's what threw me off. Me too. As long as he's planning a trip, how sick can he be?
Me too. Exactly. And so, but we have him being him right up to the very end. And I just, I've been watching a lot of that. I've been watching a lot of the recent Monday shows.
The sad part is I was never able to say goodbye.
Yeah.
I said it when he was lying there in the hospital room.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll be back, Rick, but get better, please. I love you. And they said that sometimes people who are like that in a coma of that sort really can hear you. They can hear you.
Absolutely.
So I said it in case he could hear me, I may have even said, I love you.
Yeah.
I think I did, as a matter of fact. But, I just sat there and went, a lot of good it's doing me, I just wish he were, I wish he were kind of, like some people die in a hospital, but they're going and they say hello, goodbye to the family, and I love you, and, see you on the other side or whatever. I never got that opportunity.
No. But
so the answer to that is, folks, everybody you love, tell them how much you love them right now,
As Warren Zevon said, enjoy every sandwich. And really, at the end of the day, like I'm glad I have this opportunity on our show to say this to you. I love you, man. And I'm so grateful that I'm in your orbit where I am. I'm so grateful for the transfer of knowledge that I've gotten through you.
Anytime you need me, I'm here.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you. You're going to be at Sheckfest?
I'm sure I will.
Okay. My plan is that I'm going to be out there as well for that. And I'm glad I get to see you guys.
What it is, it's his memorial.
Yeah.
Statement, because he was cremated. I don't know when he was cremated even. Have you heard anything?
We'll talk about it off camera.
Okay.
But yeah, I hope that not only are you there, I hope that you're speaking there, because again, Rick, there wasn't a conversation that he and I had, and we had a lot of them that where your name didn't come up. Like you were his best friend and a huge part of, and maybe the second best friend, because he talked a lot about Randy as well. But
Randy was a really good friend to him. Randy took care of him.
Absolutely. And we dedicated our tribute. There are a few people that we dedicated our tribute to last week, and you and Randy were certainly two of those names, because you just were a huge part of his life, and he meshed everything together. And I just appreciate that about so much about him.
Now that you spent 2 hours wasting what little time I have left here on Earth, it's been nice talking to you. And as I say, if you want to do this again, I'd be more than happy to do
Absolutely.
it.
Anytime an anecdote of Rick comes up, write it in point form or whatever, because I want to get as many stories as possible. But thank you, Alex, for being you. And again, we're talking about our friend Rick, our mutual friend Rick. You and I wouldn't know each other without him. But again, I thank you for your contribution to broadcasting. I thank you for stretching the field and the boundaries of broadcasting and all that you are. I appreciate the hell out of you, Alex Bennett. Thank you so much for being you, man.
And I want to thank Howard Stern for everything I have.
And with that, we're going to stop here. I'll do an outro separately, and I'm going to hit stop now. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay, so there was my conversation with broadcast legend. I can say it now that he's gone. Broadcast legend Alex Bennett. I hope throughout the show, not only that we did a nice job saying a few anecdotes about Letterman, a lot of talk about Shecky. That's one of his very best friends right there, and for him to open up with some of those stories, I'm really grateful that we can share a kinship in that. And talk about our friend Rick, but not just the Letterman anecdotes, not just talking about Rick, but I hope that there are people out there who now didn't know that Alex existed, but now know and get a flavor for the idea of how much he did influence broadcasting, and even when he was able to talk about some of the things that he's done. Incredibly humble when you think about the actuality of things and what he did actually mean to broadcast, how he did actually take the ball down a few yards that the ball had never been before. And talking about Lenny Bruce, talking about Bill Hicks, comics who did that when it came to the world of stand-up. Alex certainly did that when it came to broadcasting. And it's funny, like I'm a huge enthusiast of David Letterman. I'm a huge enthusiast of Alex Bennett. I just have a thing for broadcasters. I really appreciate the fact that whenever I come across a legendary I have the same thing for Brian Williams. I really like Brian Williams a lot as a newsman and as a broadcaster as well. Anyway, so grateful for that. Now, for those who like the Bill Hicks story, there is a Don Giller collection that focuses on Bill Hicks, and it includes Hicks's appearance that was stricken from the record on the Late Show early on. There was an appearance of Bill Hicks that didn't make the cut, or they shot it and cut it and it didn't make the show afterwards, and they put up footage of Bill Sheft in one of the test shows instead. Years later, when they wanted to rectify that situation, this is after they didn't know that Bill was dying at the time. Years after, when they wanted to show the set that Bill did that night and had Bill's mother on the show as a guest to talk about it, they didn't know where that footage was. And Rick Scheckman was the guy who had it. Incidentally, just so you're aware, when Bill Hicks got cut that night, the very next day, he was on Alex Bennett's show and talked about it and talked about, so we're talking about broadcast history and stand-up history all meshed together. Letterman involved, Rick Scheckman involved, Alex Bennett involved, Bill Hicks involved. Like it's a historic story in the annuals of stand-up and broadcasting. And I'm glad we got to kind of talk about that today on the Letterman podcast. The Letterman podcast has one sponsor, that is Rupert G. Machin of the Hello Deli. By the time this comes out, and we're going to shoot a separate video about this for them, but Hello Deli is being put up for sale right now. And we've kind of alluded to that. And, if you want to get yourself some merchandise, now it's official. I can officially talk about, hey, if you want to get yourself some Late Show with David Letterman merchandise, stop procrastinating. Go get it right now. I'm going to try and convince, I don't know how long it's going to be, if somebody's going to come along and buy the place right now or not. But after 30 plus years, they're getting ready to retire. Anybody interested who has a passion for the food business, they've prime New York real estate, obviously, and the legendary Hello Deli is going up for sale. You can call May Chin at 917-232-8348 and give her a call. Obviously, if you're listening to this show years after 2023, don't do that, because the Hello Deli probably will have been sold by then. It might happen quickly, but I'm just saying, I don't know if we have time to get one last t-shirt out or something before they give their swan song. Somebody might come and buy it tomorrow. I don't know. But what I do know is that I appreciate Rupert. I appreciate May. I appreciate the Hello Deli. You have no idea how much. Rupert messaged me, before the announcement went out, and he's like, "Oh, just so you know, we're always going to support you no matter what." Thank you, Rupert. I love you. I appreciate that. But I mean, man, thinking about you right now, you just lost your mom. And I just appreciate you so much, Rupert. And it's funny how these last batch of shows with Rick passing have been a little bit of a lot of reflection and a lot of circles completing themselves, and hopefully new circles will start to be built. We certainly want to be a part of that for people, transferring the knowledge, of all the stories from 30 Rock, from the Ed Sullivan Theater, everything to do with Letterman and Company. And this is very much a Letterman and Company, show, is the Letterman podcast. And I hope that has been evident over the last few. I hope you continue to join and share, like, subscribe, all that crap. We'd appreciate it very, very much. But a lot of sentimentality and hopefully entertainment, a lot of cool things coming up with the show as well. So that has been Alex Bennett, gabnet.net, if you want to find Alex. His evening shows that he puts on are definitely politically slanted. The Monday show that I go on every week has a panel. It's just a bunch of people shooting the bull, and it's a lot of fun. But regardless, Alex Bennett, thank you so much for coming on the Letterman podcast. That has been another edition of the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you, and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.